Jody, if you can, there we go, we're recording. My name is Mike Remington, City Council member and Mayor Pro Tem. I am calling to order our City Council workshop for Tuesday, October 27th at 5:34. Tonight, we have budget items that we're working on for the next biennium 2021-2022. These are really designed to be department presentations. It's a foundational piece for us to be able to discuss the budget, to hear about what departments are recommending and what's in their budget for the next cycle. We have first up will be information technology, followed by public works. And then we'll discuss our internal service fund and our debt services as well. This is slated to go, I believe it's for an hour and a half, Jody, is that correct?
No, 2 hours. It goes until 7:30.
Till 7:30, thank you. I did want to invite Amy McHenry. She had an appreciation she wanted to share with everybody. And while we don't normally have a good of the order, I'm going to insert that. So if I'm in trouble, Jody, you can put it on my tab. So Council Member Amy McHenry.
Thank you. It's really quick. I was writing or drafting a statement to go along with publishing the results of the community survey. And I just wanted to read it to you, and I'll email it to you all after as well. So I apologize I didn't get to it beforehand. The Duval City Council wants to thank you for your time and thoughtfulness in completing the 2020 City of Duval survey. We are constantly seeking to learn more about our community's experiences, opinions, and ideas, especially as we head into discussions for the 2021-2022 city budget. Your collective voice guides our decisions on all components of the direction of our city. And there's a little blurb here that I put as an extra because I wasn't sure. Depending on, I think the mayor and staff potentially were also drafting statements or something. So I just wanted to add this just in case that we could use or take off, which would be in the coming weeks, the mayor and each city department will be responding to comments collected in the survey. If you have more comments, questions, or concerns, we encourage you to reach out to us. So this is a first draft, and that's just kind of some stuff I put together, and I'll email it out. So if you have opinions, you can respond and we can change it up a little.
Thank you, Amy. That very well written. You make us look really good. So thank you for doing that. We're so appreciative of our citizens having responded to the survey. Well, we'll go ahead, get on to our main items. First one will be information technology. We have honor of having Kevin with us this evening, Kevin Smith, the IT director. He works at another city, but he's our IT director too. And we appreciate all the advancements that you've worked to make here for us as a city and responding to all our questions. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, everybody. I've already been introduced, and I'm heading into my first year anniversary for City of Snoqualmie as the IT director. So bear with me if I help guide me on the finer points that you'd like to hear about, and I'll give you a general presentation here. So IT department. The agenda for tonight is department overview, the FTE changes that are being proposed, some of the new costs that we're going to see in 2021 and 2022, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'm going to keep this one short. Our department overview, City of Snoqualmie provides 24 hours per week of IT support for the City of Duval. This includes all the desktop support, server architecture and hardware support, the network infrastructure, application and services that are provided to the city, as well as strategic planning to keep you guys on the up and up and running well. This last year has been very successful in getting some of the bigger projects underway or wrapped up. And we got a few in this next biennium that should that are kind of hitting our budget pretty hard. So I'm going to bring this to your attention. So in let me get rid of this window here so I can see my screen. For this next biennium in 2021, you're going to see a fairly sizable increase in our budget. This is tied to the ERP or finance software replacement project that's being proposed, as well as capital outlay for some new server architecture that we need to implement. We keep it around for a life cycle of 7 years, and the current system has been in place for 8.5. So we're a little overdue to replace the servers that we have in the city, and so you're going to see some sizable capital outlay there. And in 2022, the budget falls back a little bit more in line. You're going to see a slight uptick in the services department. That's related to a proposed additional 24 hours per week of support for the city of Duval, as well as an increase in the license maintenance fees for the ERP software. And we'll get into those here in a second. So changes to staffing levels. We currently have, most of you know Andy Latham. He provides the 24 hours, which is approximately 0.6 full-time employment for Duval. You also get the wealth of knowledge from the rest of the City of Snoqualmie IT staff for some of the bigger projects that require networking changes or server architecture, planning and design. Don't really have any proposed changes to how we're handling that for titles or promotions or anything, but I am proposing that we add another 0.6 FTE. This came out of some discussions I had with the mayor as well as the interim city administrators around Andy's time currently. As we have these bigger projects, he needs time to dedicate to provide those, either the planning or the implementation pieces. And the city's need for hands-on desktop support is oftentimes pulls him away from getting those projects done in a timely fashion. So the proposal is that we hire someone who takes on that day-to-day operations within the city, and as they walk through the buildings and do, site visits, anyone who has a problem can reach right out to them and get immediate support at their desktop. Keep people working instead of looking for solutions, and also keep Andy working on getting the city moved forward. So that also has another benefit of training our replacement as we move further into this ILA and working together as a city. There's at some point, City of Duval may decide to separate, and I'd love to have somebody on staff who is already well aware of the infrastructure that's put in place and where all the gotchas are, if there are any, and how to manage without City of Snoqualmie running the show. So it'd be nice to train a replacement. So at some point, City of Duval can become self-sufficient if they so choose, or we can continue this well into the future with City of Snoqualmie providing support. So new costs in 2021 and 2022. As I already mentioned, we have some server replacements coming up. That's going to be about $225,000 to get our systems up to speed and again set for the next 7 years. And that runs a lot of the file storage as well as some of the in-house applications that the City of Duval relies on. We're going to secure one of our server network racks that's sitting in PD in the hallway. There's been a couple instances where we've had small outages related to cables being caught on passing officers. We'd like to put that in a little more of a secure network rack with a door to keep all that stuff self-contained and to provide a little more physical security around those assets. Reduce our exposure to outages. One of the problems right now that we'd like to address in City of Duval is Wi-Fi access points. Currently, Wi-Fi is provided via commercial networks, not the city network. We'd love to implement or put Wi-Fi access points in all the buildings so that anyone on the laptop has direct access directly to the network and can get to those network resources without using a VPN. We can also provide guest access to the city and manage that via a secure Wi-Fi infrastructure. The police department has laptops that are in this next biennium that are up for replacement. We're going to replace 3 of those in the current patrol cars. Those come at about $4,000 a piece, as well as accompanying hardware to mount them in the vehicles, wireless radios so they can communicate with the dispatch service. And then here's the big one, ERP replacement software. Currently, that's budgeted at around $215,000 in year 2021. We currently use an ERP software platform called Springbrook, which has a software maintenance fee of about $17,000. per year, and that is the ERP software. If we go with one of the vendors, is going to likely raise that ERP maintenance ongoing to about $54,000 total per year, year over year, with a $215,000 implementation cost, software licensing cost and implementation. And if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. E-signature software. With our move to remote work, the need to pass along documents in a secure way so we can validate that someone who was supposed to sign them actually did sign them becomes hard. And so we need to implement a e-signature software solution, which can help validate that the signature on the document is actually from the person whose signature it is. It's not just a cut and paste of someone else's signature. And that we're currently in negotiations with a software vendor, SHI, out value added reseller, SHI, to get a software cost for the Adobe solution, which will work right in with the Adobe Acrobat reader software that the city uses for PDF maintenance. There will also be a accompanying e-signature maintenance fee year over year to license that software and keep it updated. Any questions on that slide? Wow, you guys are easy.
Kevin, Mike Remington, I do have a couple if you have a moment.
Absolutely.
You had mentioned amount, so if we went with the new ERP to replace Springbrook, you had mentioned 54,000 a year ongoing. What was the implementation?
215,000 is currently what's budgeted.
215.
Yeah, and I think that is going to RFP here in the beginning of November to get vendors to actually submit proposals for that.
Our phones, sometimes I've been confused in the past. I know we've done a lot of work to upgrade and maintain our phone system, but at one point we were talking about replacing it. It was outdated. Can you give me the current status of our phones? Have all the phones been replaced, or is that something that we still need to look at?
Yes, sir. The phone system was completely replaced, and the vendor was all the hardware that runs the phone switch was replaced and updated. I think all the desk phones at this point have been replaced. There's a couple still out there.
Yeah, that's good news. Thank you. So we've talked about the potential to add some new positions to the city, and you had talked about replacement for laptops for the police officers. Have we included, maybe this is a question for mayor directors, have we included the laptops and things that we'll need for new positions? I see the mayor nodding yes, so that's done. And then my last question is on this e-signature. I know that there's platforms like DocuSign that you can use. Is the e-signature separate from that, and it's just a way of authenticating employee signatures, authorizations across all our platform, and that something like DocuSign or a separate program for moving documents around would be additional on top of that?
So City of Snoqualmie is struggling with the same problem, and we are actively working for an RFP with DocuSign. Adobe is also going to put in a bid. And it's just more of a methodology to ensure that the signature, like I said, you can validate the signature is the person who's supposed to sign. And it's an additional software on top of, like the Adobe solution works on top of and in conjunction with Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader.
Okay. I didn't know if somehow those were attached or separate. Sounds like they're separate. Well, thank you, Kevin.
You bet.
I see we have a couple of other questions. Councilmember Naplin, and then Councilmember Langall, and then Laura Thomas, I think, had her hand up as well. So Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. So
Absolutely.
I have a question that actually it's kind of a continuation of a question that I had before your time about the travel time for the work that is done here in Duval. So normally if we have an in-house employee, we are paying them a large hourly wage for their travel time. And yet a large portion of the time that we pay Snoqualmie is actually traveling to and from Duval, from Snoqualmie. And so that really cuts into the amount of time that we get. And also, if you took that into account, the hourly wage that we are paying for services is really high. And so I'm not sure if with this adding of a 0.6, if there could be a better efficiency of time so we aren't paying so much travel time.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great point. And that was one of the things we wanted to address by adding this head. The additional head that I'm proposing would be stationed in Duval, and like this is their duty station. They'll never go to Snoqualmie. If I need to have a meeting with them, I come to Duval, which I pass through Duval anyway on my way to and from work. Yeah, the idea again is to really kind of dedicate this person to Duval and reporting up to City of Snoqualmie, but separate, like truly dedicated to you. I'd love to have it dotted line to one of the staff in the city, where they're getting direction from somebody at the city, and that they're the person who's giving them their priority list for the day. And then I work on more of the performance management, keeping them on task, making sure their pay is done, all the benefits work is done. I manage them as a HR person. But yeah, that would cut out the travel time component, because a lot of the work that Andy's going to be doing, or the current 0.6 is going to be remote work, planning, documentation, design and infrastructure work. All of that can be done remotely. And we really need that person in-house to do the hands-on desktop support. If we need someone to unplug or reboot a server, they're there to do it physically. And that person, again, won't be incurring that travel time that you just brought up.
So the current 0.6 that we have is only the time when they're actually here, and then we're paying on top of that travel time. So what you're saying is we'll add 0.6 of actual work time, and potentially then we will save money by not having travel time. So the actual cost of the 0.6 isn't a full 0.6. It's actually 0.6 minus some travel time.
Well, and in the current ILA,
sort out.
Yes, ma'am. And in the current ILA that we're working under, 24 hours is dedicated to Duval. The travel time is on top of that. So you're getting a full 0.6 in the city from Andy, who's currently fulfilling that. And then we add on travel, which I really dislike that we're doing that. I don't think that's fair, but I didn't write that ILA. And so, yes, we get to cut out the travel, a large portion of that travel time that you're being charged today.
That'd be amazing, because I don't like the travel time either.
I don't either, and especially at the bill rate that's being charged. I think that's, I'm sorry, excuse me, but I won't use that word. I'll just say it's horrible. So I agree with you.
So glad we're in agreement.
Well, there's some open budget discussions. Councilmember Langle, you're up next.
Yeah, I just have actually two questions. In replacing the ERP software, I did a little calling around different cities around the country, and one of the things that I learned is that the integration between accounting software packages is much more sophisticated in the last 10 years. And so, and I haven't seen the RFP, so maybe we aren't in a place to answer this question, but it's conceivable, given what I've learned, that we might not buy all of our modules from one vendor. And, you know, I've really tried to research this, and the information is pretty solid. I think that there is a lot of opportunity. What I found in one city, for example, was they went with one of the vendors that we are looking at or have been looking at, and have been very happy with those services, but they ended up going with a different vendor for something else. And so I guess, since I haven't seen the RFP, I guess I'm curious how your budgeted number came about. So that's one question. The second question is, we've bought a lot of computers in the last couple of years. We budgeted some in 2019, and they arrived at the beginning of 2020. I remember seeing them in the conference room. And then, of course, with COVID, we had to go out and buy a bunch more. So it's really unclear to me how many computers we even have anymore. And I thought maybe you just off the top of your head, or somebody knows how many computers we have. I mean, I know it's in our asset management list and all that, but it's, and I'm not quibbling with new ones we're buying. I mean, for example, I know we've budgeted a computer specifically to go in a vehicle with the building department. That makes like total sense to do that, especially if we're getting more integrated software. So, but I'm just curious, how many computers are we trying to maintain now?
I do not have the number off the top of my head. I do know it is in the asset spreadsheet that was provided for this full budget that we're going through.
Yeah.
I can get you an answer though. And I'll circle back to your first question around the number 215,000 and where that came from. The ILA that we're currently operating under this is an extra project outside of the support that we provide to the city of Duval. So I've been fairly hands-off, and will provide technical support as the project moves forward. I do know that $215,000 was a projected cost from one of the vendors, and that's kind of where that got pulled from.
Okay.
And I will agree with you on the integrations of today's ERP solutions. And I would caution that buying wholesale from one vendor is a great way to minimize ongoing support costs and the confusion that can come about with when you get the they did it, it's not me. And I've had that at various positions in the past where when you have multiple vendors involved in a solution, oftentimes finding the root cause of a problem can be further exacerbated and further challenging because the vendor who is being implicated by whatever error is being thrown will go, well, that's the guy upstream who's sending me the data. So there is some challenges with having that multiple vendor solution. You can get some great price points on software doing it that way, but it can also cause other problems further down the line. So it's a 6 of one, half a dozen of another where you want to invest your money and time.
Yeah, I think they were really looking at modules that had unique functions. For example, in this particular example, I'm going to filter back and find out what they finally decided. But for example, the way they were managing their data systems for building permits was it did not need to be part of a bigger module. It was something that could stand alone because it had a very specific function.
And like in the city of Snoqualmie, we're doing an ERP project as well. And we already have Track It implemented for our planning department, and it's working great. So we're not looking to replace that software, even though the vendor we're going to has a module. So yeah, there's opportunities there as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'd just love to know how many computers we have. Dana will know.
I will find the answer for you.
Thank you. Director Laura Thomas, I think I saw your hand up earlier.
Yes, thank you. One thing that I heard about was, and this is for you, Councilmember Remington, about our software update for our phones. That did happen, but I don't believe our phone replacement happened. I know at least it didn't down at City Hall. So I'll go back and look at some information and see what was actually replaced on the phone end. And then tomorrow at our FAC meeting will be the kickoff of talking about the process moving forward for the ERP. I think the one thing that is a little bit different than what we have now is that right now while we have Springbrook, we're looking at to do more modules in budgeting and financial software along with also some sort of permit tracking system. So I just want to make sure that because the yearly cost is going to go up, but partly because we're going to have a lot more software options if that's what we choose to do. So I just wanted to give that quick update, and we'll report back because FAC will be talking about that tomorrow. So thank you.
Laura, thank you. I think that's a key for me. If we need to put additional money into the phone system, it's a huge tool for our employees, and we want to make sure that's modernized. And so if we could work on that and see if we need to incorporate it in the budget. Kevin, I kind of cut you off with all these questions and a bunch more poured in, so I'm turning it back over to you so you can continue your presentation.
Presentation is complete. We got to the question slide.
Okay.
So, yeah,
that was it. Well, Kevin, thank you. I just want to ask one more time, was there any other questions or feedback for Kevin? Well, good. Kevin, thank you. We'll let you go. We appreciate the work you do for us. We really appreciate the contract. And you know what it's like with technology now. It's such a key thing of everything that we do. We're working hard to modernize it. That was a big part of the mayor's proposed budget was to make us more efficient. And I think with your help, we're going to get there. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Take care.
Right.
Next up is Public Works. I believe that will be Director Liniszewski. Steve, did I get that right?
Unless somebody else wants to do it, yes.
Okay. And you're talking about utilities, which includes water, sewer, and storm drainage, and then our capital improvement program.
Yeah, and I hate to burst everyone's bubble. You will probably be tired of me, but I think we are having Streets 101, TBD 102, Transportation Benefit District, as well as Big Rock Ballfield Park 106. and then CIP at the end. So without further ado, prepare to be talked to for a while. Let's go slideshow mode. Okay, can I assume we have slideshow mode successfully shared? Excellent. Okay, so the small but mighty public works team. Another element we cover is streets, and I apologize. There are 3 screens, and unfortunately, it auto propagates this slide on the far left. So if you're looking at my side profile, I apologize. I'll look back a little. So streets itself has 2.53 FTEs out of 2.64, and those other difference are usually billing or other administrative specialists in the finance department. So there are bits and pieces of everybody everywhere. 36 centerline miles of roadway. We take care of shoulders, traffic markings and signage, striping, roadside vegetation, some mechanized removal, some manual, street sweeping, pothole repairs, emergency services, snow and ice, tree and debris. And then pavement management is kind of buried under streets itself as the overarching planning and personnel tool for TBD. We don't have personnel associated to the Transportation Benefit District TBD yet. That's why I kind of lump them in with this group. I see there's a wave.
Steve, your screen is not changing. So if you've been flipping through the slides, we still see the opening slide.
That's no good.
You're on the PowerPoint one. You have to reshare to the other one. If you go up to view options, I think you can do reshare and then pick the one that is the full screen.
Did that fix it? Okay. So I just
So
read
we're-
back to you. Sorry about
So
that.
Steve, we're looking at department overview now.
Okay. Expenditures, they are reorganized somewhat. In this budget year, we had the LID grant written out of this fund. So that's why it is significantly down over proposed 2021. But in general, I think Dana can touch on the transfers, and then the capital outlays is the one I was referring to that is significantly different, as well as interfund services, making sure the department and its needs, whether they're one-time or ongoing, are now captured in the interfund services. Other work in general supplies is up a little over the year prior, and basic amounts for salary and benefits as budgeted. The people that support this group, put them in bits and pieces, and this will be pushed to the OneDrive, so you all have the slideshow when we're all said and done here. So myself, project managers, Larissa, the assistant engineer, our superintendent, our one engineering assistant slash whatever we call Sarah, if she does everything, our supervisor, the crew leads, maintenance 2, maintenance 1s, and seasonal workers. I'll talk more holistically about, I think, personnel underwater, since it's a little easier to digest it all. But the only real proposed change that affects this fund, which is 0.4 and 0.6 FTEs from the table, is a maintenance 1 to maintenance 2 conversion. Just the amount of work and the type of work we're doing. People are doing work at the 2 level, which isn't a detriment to them. It is a benefit to them. It is a benefit to the city, but it is a necessity. So that's why it is proposed in the budget to right side the workload. We do have the leads, 2 crew leads, currently 1 maintenance 2 and 4 maintenance 1s. So this balances the team, provides some succession planning, professional development growth that we do need here. But again, the workload is what dictates the bulk of this, because our maintenance 2s, a maintenance 1 is not required to be CDL, commercial driver's license certified. And the maintenance 2s are. However, we have 1 maintenance 1 who is driving a boatload as well as other staff members. So it has become apparent that we need that support. So I put it together in the budget proposal. interfund transfers we mentioned, and then the ongoing costs. Some elements we are working on, so insurance, internal service charges, street markings, trying to make sure we keep up with the amount of street markings we should be doing. So not just normally striping roads, but stop bars, crosswalks, which in years past have gone by the wayside based on funding. So if the staff had been given a bucket of money and the basic services were consuming that money, they didn't do anymore. So we need to make sure we are trying to provide those markings. They are, a safety element of the street network. And then street sweeping itself, we do get quite a few calls on, when's my street get swept? How does it work? Where do you go? And with the amount of oversight through NPDES, we are transitioning to split the cost. So we will be increasing our street sweeping services citywide, but the cost to this fund won't go up per se, because the storm fund will be participating in 50% of the share of that work. And that is reflected in the budget line under 404 for street operation, or for storm operation, sorry. So those are the kind of ongoing changes. But we do hope to provide that increased level of service. And we are finding that our storm drain cleaning in the summers is going much quicker than expected. That is for several reasons. One, we do it annually now, and we are able to get the bulk of the system on an annual basis. And two, we sweep. Joe is very responsive, in the winters when we put sand and ice and de-icer down, to try to clean the sand up as soon as practical. If we know there's another freeze coming, we can leave it out, but it does cause slip issues and whatnot when it is not warranted. So he does try to get it off, and trying to do that and maintain that action helps our system stay clean. So it is a shared expense that we believe is reasonable. As far as mandates go, roads are here. There's nothing more fixed out there than the roads themselves. So we don't control the weather, but we do try to do a good job on keeping our streets drivable. It may or may not be known, but insurance carriers, you as citizens, we all as citizens have insurance rates, and those rates are, an indicator of how well your system operates. So average accidents like within 2 miles of your home. So they look at how the cities treat their systems and if there are a lot of accidents. So we try to, again, hit our hot spots all the time. And we had frost this weekend that was mitigated with some de-icing applications. No carryovers proposed. Cutting room floor, we always would like more. What we have in here is specific to striping. It is not to go and do it all next year, but to begin to add more annually. So I would love to have more resources available, but we also know that there is a hit to the revenue side of the streets fund, just with the economy in general, on those shared state revenues. So that's kind of that. Tried to keep things status quo. We are all hands on deck at capacity, as well as weather related. You get everybody on that list participates in one way, shape, or form, especially for snow and ice removal and driving and whatnot. Push to the future, just adding other additional funds to enhance some of those programs. And striping and signage is pretty imperative around here. And I think with the survey that was put out, lighting, I think a programmatic approach to maybe a lighting program where if we set aside a certain amount of money in every year, we can begin to either A, add lights, or B, replace lights that are have been left behind through programs that we have had success in getting the grants on, as well as just providing them in places where we don't have any. So that, in brief, is street operations in a nutshell. Assume there are some questions, or if not, we go into TBD.
I'll open it up to city council members and staff. Any questions for Steve regarding those proposed budget items? Steve, I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to jump in with a quick question. You talked about having some additional funds. I can't tell you how much our citizens appreciate when we're out sanding and clearing off the ice and snow. There aren't many of those that we have, but when they hit, it's just a big thing. I live on a hill and it's like seeing the cavalry come in. So here's my question. You had mentioned that, we budget money for that, for sand, salt, and of course the extra hours for all hands on deck. We do have our new plow as well, our dump truck and plow. Where would we put that? Do you have a suggestion? Where would that money come from? And I think one year we had 70,000 in expense. We obviously pulled the money from someplace. Where did it come from in the past? And is there an amount that you think would be appropriate, along with the mayor, to make sure we have a reserve available?
I just pulled up the budget document so I could take a quick look. Certainly, specifying and having an overtime line is helpful. In years past, we had not had that, and it is in every fund now, so it isn't necessarily, this is a stellar fund. They all have that proviso. But I think certainly, there's not a lot there. We're fortunate when we do get those big events. We have had success in the past on getting them covered, whether it's a federally declared emergency or however else. So, and I don't recall last time. I don't think Dana was here when we had Snowmageddon. That was the winter of
2019.
Yeah. So I don't know if we absorbed some of that or if we made some transfers. I don't recall, and shame on me because I think Laura and I had to do those budget transfers because we had no finance. But that's what it was. I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I don't need to look too much to the past. I'm always trying to say, I appreciate that. I try to figure out what we've been doing and what can we do to improve things. Dana, I guess question for you, and maybe this is shame on me for not knowing, do any of our departments have a specific line item for overtime?
Yes, they all do.
They all do. So I'm used to seeing that where we have a specific line item. So we could certainly think about adding overtime. That's probably one of the larger expenses. I'm sure sand and salt add up pretty quickly as well, but certainly the overtime is a big piece. And I think that might be something we could potentially look at as well, that would just help cover those. That maybe we can be thinking about that, both mayor and directors, if we're going to have some funds. We do have reserve funds, but it might be nice, I think the mayor's mentioned this in the past, to have a fund set aside for these weather emergencies, whether it be providing an extra officer at the intersection to help traffic flow, or to be able to get extra folks on the plows, whatever it might be. That might be something for us to consider. It's a reserve fund that would be set aside specifically for that, environmental type emergency. All righty, Steve, sorry. Thank you. Mayor, you have some input?
Yeah, and I remember that we were able to absorb a good chunk of that money last time around, but of course, when you have those long-term events, there's also other work that's not getting done. So, sometimes that money is able to be moved around, but, as we've talked the last couple of years, getting some of these reserve funds that have an escalating balance each year as to where we can, stabilize those funds is definitely in the long-term plan. And I think, once TBD rolls a little bit more, we'll be able to do a little bit more in streets. But, the fact of the matter is right now, you probably pull it, unless you're cutting somewhere else, you're pulling from fund balance or general fund to get, or contingency to stack that up. But that's not necessarily a problem either, because the way we've got the budget, we are taking some of the one-time expenses out of fund balance.
Yeah.
But we could also do that to start setting a baseline fund as well.
I don't know we'll solve it tonight, but I would like us to take a look. It is one of the things I've talked to other council members about, looking at our reserve balances. Are they at the appropriate level? Do we need an additional one? I think that would be helpful and a good discussion as we move down. Councilmember Lango, you have a question.
Actually, a comment. I've been, I think Laura knows this, and Dana knows this, and Jody certainly knows this, I've been studying actually our overtime and our comp time distributions, and Dana's provided some really great additional updates for me over the last year. And it's really worth taking a look at that And I am taking a look at it, because when you start to compute what we spend out in overtime, because it's time and a half, and you start looking at that relative to staffing patterns, you can really start to see you can see the question about efficiency of use of funds. And so it's not just overtime we want to look at. We want to look at the comp time computations as well. And of course, Public Works, what's good is that those charts are by month, so you can isolate the unique events, and you can you could have a reserve. I mean, the data is really there, and so you could estimate a reserve for those unique climate related events pretty easily, I think. Maybe Steve thinks differently, but I think the data is there to do the estimating.
Yeah, and I hate to add more lines to a budget, but other places I have been, we would add a supply line for winter materials. You would add an overtime for that winter specialized work, which is normally flood, wind, snow. So that's something where we could track it a little more effectively. It's there in line already under supplies, but you have to go subline to kind of see what's actually spent. So that's something of interest. And then we do, for those who'd like to know, when we do buy our anti-icing fluid, we actually buy it from WashDOT in bulk, and try to save as much as we can on those costs too. So.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you, Steve. Well, Councilmember Napland has input.
Thanks. I have two comments. The first one is sort of a follow-up that made me contemplate overtime. And just looking historically at the street fund, the overtime looks fairly level, which when we have overtime related to storm streets, are we not charging it to the street fund?
We haven't in the years past. Unlike like we're doing now with water that we can associate it to.
Mm-hmm.
We have not in the past.
So how does that work? Does that mean other funds are paying for non-street things?
It means that the way a person is allocated through the budget process that is paying that share.
Okay. So if someone normally is allocated to parks but spends the entire day doing street clearing, the street clearing gets charged to parks.
I wouldn't use that analogy, but yes. However, that person is split, because we have no one really dedicated to parks.
Got it.
However, there's 7 degrees of split that those are paying the rates. So yes.
Okay. Have you done a study on your allocations to see how reasonable those allocations are versus what they're actually doing?
We have done that in the past. That is not something that is done on an annual basis, but I know we try to correlate the work to people and now in through fuel. So it is becoming a more regular process, but the tools we have aren't great except for tracking systems. So Joe does have the guys track their work through Springbrook. There are tasks that they track. So yeah. Not perfect.
When you authorize overtime, typically it would say what they were doing, right? So is there any reason we can't actually charge overtime based on what they're doing rather than they're just slice and dice allocations?
Other than the fact that it's manual for Dana's group to do, and does she have the time to do that? Joe's manually making it happen on the crew's side as well as then Dana implementing it. Because even if they did it through task order, Springbrook, correct me if I'm wrong, Dana, will not harvest that information, split up the pie, and then suck it out of the other fund. It won't do it. So it is then a manual allocation of resource internal to do that.
Okay, so I have a second question, even though that seemed like a multi-part question. My other question is just, I don't think we talked about revenue, but one thing I noticed in this fund in particular, it looks like the projected starting balance is $80,000, which is pretty low for such a large fund. And we're projected to end the budgeted upcoming biennium at a fund balance of $7,000, I believe. That feels a little like we're cutting it pretty close. And the other thing I feel a little concerned about is historically, the general fund has supplemented the street fund. And I don't know that that's that unusual with other cities, that a general fund maybe transfers something, but we have in the past, and in the past, just the last 4 years, it's about $65,000 per year the general fund has transferred in. And so my concern is we're not doing that anymore. And what makes me feel not super great about that is that we ended up getting the TBD money. And so I feel a little bit concerned that the timing of pulling back one funding source when we get a new funding source makes me feel a little uncomfortable, because when when council agreed to put the TBD forward to the voters, it was, we have things that we can't afford now, and we need more money to do more. And so my concern is what happened is we got more money and we said, oh, well, let's take back some money we normally spend on this type of thing, and we'll go find other things to do. I think the technical term is supplanting potential. I don't know. But I'm not saying it's illegal what we did. I just feel like, just from a sense of integrity, it feels a little bit yucky that we asked the taxpayers for more money to do more, and then we pulled back existing funding out of the street fund. So I don't know. I maybe you could comment on that.
The only comment I would have is that 102 is the TBD fund, and that is completely separate from the 101. It is not receiving any monies from the general fund for the 102. The 102 receipts only the 0.2% sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
The strategies on how money goes into and out of the 101,
Mm-hmm.
I have not participated in creation of. So the operations of that system are what I've created. Others are working on the revenue transfer side of that. So I would have to defer that to Dana.
I guess why I think it feels relevant is we used to do overlay projects that ran out of the street fund.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so we used to send money over to the street fund to do overlay projects. Now we've moved all of that money out to the TBD fund, and we've pulled back money that normally funded overlay projects. And so now we're making the TBD fund pay for overlay projects that we used to pay for using existing funding. So that's where I feel uncomfortable.
So Steve, does that make sense, the concern? This is a new fund, how we manage that fund, the impacts on other funds. I think that's a great discussion point as well.
Yeah, it's a great philosophy, and the 19 budget didn't have any asphalt overlay or roadway construction in it that I can see.
That wasn't the Baton Road overlay?
So there's capital lines, and then there was a programmatic overlay and then reconstruction line in the budget. So if it got moved over, like you said, to the Baton part.
Yeah.
So Steve, is there a solution to answer that concern? Like I say, this is a new fund, so we're getting used to it and how we're going to use it. But the fact that it's here has raised that question about how that fund is used and which direction funds are moving to. I think our commitment to our citizens was we would use that additional funds, but I don't know that we wanted it to supplant other funds that we have. Is that right, Jennifer? I mean, that's
exactly, you described it really well. And I think the biggest concern I have, in addition to just kind of my own sense of integrity, is we're projected to end the street fund with a balance of $7,000. That's just, normally you have kind of, Dana, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
From my prior place of employment, that's not uncommon. Where the street fund, which is just truly an operating street operation, and you don't put capital projects in there, you may every once in a while, but not big ones like the Baton Road reconstruction project. That would be done in a capital improvement project. But a lot of it is funded by the general fund, and you want to get it down because you're putting general fund monies in there to help pay for the operation. You want to just keep it as low as possible. You want to pay for as much as possible with your motor vehicle tax, and the general fund is already transferring in kind of the sales tax, or not the sales tax, but 20% of the property tax is still being brought into that fund. It's just being receipted directly in there as property tax. But it is not unusual, I think, to have a fund like that get low just because all of the existing funds that are in there, the special revenues that go into there, are being used up.
So the question would be, when we talk about our operating costs of general fund type funds, when we talk about how much reserve we have, perhaps we should include operating expenses of the street fund to calculate how much reserve we should hold. Does that make sense?
That could be.
Because otherwise we really have no reserve for street functions.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's like another one of those areas to be looking at, continual reserve funds. But I think one of the things that might be helpful to help guide this discussion is having probably a 5 to 10 year history of street fund funding and operations, and see what we can pull together to give that perspective of a decent time before the TBD and what we're doing now. So I think that would help guide the discussion significantly by having that information.
I don't want to lose track of this. I think you're right, Mary. I think it's a good discussion. I think some historical view on it. Part of this is just, for me as a council member, understanding this new fund, how it's working, and answering, I think, Jennifer's key question here, that we didn't ask citizens for more money and then take money we were using elsewhere. It's kind of feels like a bait and switch. That's not what we're doing, but I think we want to understand this process more. I think Matt Iyer was next. Matt, you had a question or feedback?
Yeah, my ears perked up, when we talk about overtime and comp time. I think one thing that I've found problematic in operations is, comp time is, I find it's difficult to quantify, and in terms of the cost to the city and operations, just because by nature, every few days that you do comp time, you lose a day of production, and it can be really difficult. Difficult from an operation standpoint, especially if you're running lean. That I found in operations that I've been involved in that it makes those overtime issues, you're not really getting ahead if you choose to use overtime that has the options of comp. And also, from an accounting standpoint, it kind of it becomes kind of smoke in the background and difficult to quantify. And I think, I don't have any particular proposal for it, but I think I would be supportive in looking at options in terms of how we utilize that and approach that, because I think it can be very difficult to quantify.
You had a comment for Matt?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we've been actually talking about for several years, and there's been a significant shift in overtime and comp from the city overall in the last 12 years. But I believe, and Dana and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, to make changes to when folks can request overtime or comp time, we'd need code changes, I believe. So, and then that would likely go into CBA as well, as to how potentially how that's comp time is provided versus OT. So that's a good conversation that, internally trying to figure out where the appropriate use of OT is, and we don't do OT unless it's necessary. And then figuring out that balance between OT and comp time is important. But I just want to caution that actually doing that is going to take a big conversation and a lot of research and work. But it's also part of us building our efficiencies. So it's a good point to bring up. Thank you.
So Mary, just to be clear, you're mentioning that it's also part of the union contracts as well. So it's not quite as simple as saying we're switching from one to another. Yeah. Well, thank you. I believe, Matt, I'm sorry. Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely, if you really, I firmly believe from my experience that if you really take into consideration those losses, that it makes overtime, it's you have to only use it for necessity, because otherwise you're just kind of spinning your wheels. The next month you're gonna lose that time. But anyway, that's just a general philosophy thing. Also, in terms of this is the point where I would bring up again those lights. I believe, and I'd ask council to consider including some additional funds to replace the lights that I identified in the previous meeting.
Good. For our citizens that might be listening, Councilmember Iyer had brought up on a couple of occasions, we have a program to replace our old lights with some new LED, more efficient. They're, instead of the globe style that kind of light up the universe, they really are directional and point downwards. We had a contract, and I believe we had monies available through a grant to be able to replace those. Some of the lights in town were missed, so some neighborhoods will see that they don't have the new style lights. The question we have is, and I think Matt is, Councilmember Iyer is encouraging us to consider putting funds towards that. Another option, obviously, is to wait till we can get another grant and have the grant pay for those. And so that's the question on the table, and one that we should be looking at in this budget as well. Councilmember Langle, you were next.
Yeah, after listening to this conversation, something that occurred to me is that we've really never had a definition discussion about what is the type of routine work that goes out of the street fund versus what type of neighborhood related work comes out of the Transportation Improvement District. When we made the adjustments to the TID language in the tax legislation, we made sure that there was language to do special projects in neighborhoods, but we've never taken that to another point that would influence how money was distributed in the budget. So that's just really a comment. And, but I think it's worth thinking about as we distribute money into the street fund versus the TID.
Thank you. Steve, did you want to respond, or are we ready to move on to the next question?
I think Councilmember McHenry had a question, but yeah, we'll go into the TBD fund next. So Doc.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McHenry.
Mine's not a question, just I wanted to touch back on what Councilmember Naplin brought up, and thinking about how just because we have those TBD funds doesn't mean that we shouldn't contribute more. And I do look forward to having that conversation at a future meeting, because it is something that's really important to our community.
Again, for our citizens, sometimes we use acronyms and things. So we're talking about the Transportation Benefit District. We have special funding approved by our citizens to a small increase in our sales tax. That money goes directly towards things that, we said when we requested the funds that they would go directly to streets and sidewalks and things along that line. So this discussion is in the budget process is related to, how we fund that. A great deal of the work that we do is fortunately through grants. We have been fortunate to get large grants from outside the city, from the county, and I don't know, I think sometimes even from the state for some projects. And these monies are integral part of our being able to get that work done. But we do have internal funds. And so we're just talking about where those funds are located and making sure that we are putting enough funds in there to take care of our streets. Any other questions before we have Steve move on? Okay, Director Laniszewski, you've got several items.
Okay, we see the beginning slide of the 102 fund.
So this is the Duval 1913. Now we're up to the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so the Transportation Benefit District, TBD, as Councilmember Langle mentioned, we haven't done anything with it yet. So there's very little proposed to be expended out of here. It's understanding more along the lines of, what should we expect to receive annually? How will we implement that? This year we have dedicated at 2 overlays that are marked on the TBD's overlay program with grant match of $460,000. So we have 0.2% sales and use tax that comes to this fund. Same 36 miles of road, asphalt overlay, programmatic funds, as we have strong words for matching and leveraging our own dollars as we do manage our payment system. The little image on the graph there is road quality as far as pavement condition index, years of life. There is a sweet spot. Once you dip past it, you spend significant amount of dollars more than if you maintain it over time with overlays and minor repairs. So the budget shows, I think, 286 for 2021 and 302 for 2022. Nothing in the 2020 estimate. However, where we are and how we are trending, it looks like this year from inception in April, we should receive about 160,000 by the end of the year. Again, not budgeted as far as any of the 286. So this is just kind of informing you folks of what is coming in relative to what we thought and budgeted, which was 0. There's staffing and other considerations in this fund. It is new, so it is brand new to us. Again, the intent as far as this year is to try to maximize our dollars with grant match and get overlays on the 2 roadway projects that have been designated as the priorities, which is Brewer Road starts at 3rd place and then ends at the curve right by 275th. Brewer Road is also AKA 152nd. And then the other road is Roney Road, which is a cutoff road between Baton Road and Big Rock Road. Those are the 2 roads this year. Carryover is, again, what we're carrying over is what we receipted because we hadn't budgeted anything. Nothing cut yet because we really don't have a strong strategy moving forward other than overlays. So that is that one quickly in a nutshell. Any follow up on that at all?
Questions from council? I don't see any, Steve. I think we can move. Councilmember Langle.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about your memo, actually, Mayor Pro Tem, which the first point was, what are our priorities, right? And so when I think about the Transportation Improvement District, and the fact that we don't really have a plan for it, and I'm not a big planner, believe it or not, no matter how many questions I ask, is that I think it would be useful to council in this budget process to put a little thinking into the 2 points that have just been made. You know, what are the kind of routine things that should be streets, and so that we don't commingle those ideas with the improvement district, but also then on the same line, we want to make sure that emergency type related expenditures don't travel into the improvement districts, because those really are special funds. I mean, what I've seen for different places is it's super important that the neighborhoods feel like they got something special from that extra taxation. And when we do that, we should really celebrate it so that the neighborhoods know. So I think this is actually an exciting opportunity for council on the policy side. Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. So the mystery memo that she brought up, I had over the weekend sent a email out. I love memo. It makes me sound like, you know, from the desk of Mayor Pro Tem. I feel really important right now. So my email just simply hit a few things for council members to take a look at the budget. They're pretty broad. I think I'll send those out to staff as well, just so that we have transparency. They're pretty basic things from my own background, things that you look at for city budgets. They're pretty broad. Every council member is different, but I try to encourage us that we're all in this together, working on things, and certainly looking at priorities in the city. You know, things that have been laid out both from the mayor and from council, and most importantly from our citizens that are being considered. So thank you for that. So Steve, I think we're back up and running.
All righty. I almost pushed the leave button.
Well, we're at 6:38, so in practicality, we have just a little under 40 minutes to go here. So I'm not going to talk as much, so hopefully we can get partway through.
Okay, so Big Rock Fund. And 101 is a special fund, 102 is a special fund. There currently are no commingling of those dollars. Just to be clear, 106 now moving on to the Big Rock Fund is right here. So Big Rock Fund, and I don't know about you folks, but I have had a lot of correspondence lately about people and their great love of the park, especially during these stressful times. They're using the park more and more, asking about, Friday night lights. So hopefully that's coming forward. We did just book Monday through Sunday with 2 of the clubs. So about $1,000 a week in revenue starting now. So that's good. It's lacrosse and soccer, the premier group. So good news all around, not as much as we normally would have had, but again, coming in and also leaving some field use for Friday or Saturday night lights. But the field itself, it only has 0.68 FTEs of staff support by definition. 10 just about 10 acre piece, 1 field, natural grass, 2 multi-purpose fields, skate park, graffiti wall. I don't know if anybody saw the 2021 seniors from DECA recently painted the wall again. So if you're bored, go for a walk. They put up their little logo. The restroom, which takes effort. Maintenance shed now on the far north central edge. We do have 2 storm ponds, 1 for the rear, 1 for the front. Parking lot landscaping, and then of course we handle field scheduling in-house.
Hey, Steve, just a side thing real quick. Could you go back to that? I know we had some damage from a downed tree on one of our fences. Which fence was damaged?
It was kind of the first base central line over here. Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Right over there.
Is that repaired now? Is that a big thing, or is it just getting somebody out to put the fence back up?
No, and Joe thought it was probably not wise as winter barely started, and we have more trees come down. Why would we get a guy out now to fix that when we might have more damage? And nobody is renting field 3 yet, so we'll kind of hold that off till spring unless something else happens.
All righty, thank you.
So revenue for the fields, I think Dana can help too, but we've transferred more general fund revenue as we are expecting a diminishing amount of rental on the property itself for 2021, especially. That can always be adjusted, fingers crossed, if things do increase. But trying to be reasonable and then justifying what we expect. So it's conservative by all means. And then I think transfers is just, Dana can help understand why it's down over everything else is up. So.
Do you want me to interject? So the $116,000 in intergovernmental revenues, that's actually the property tax, or not the property levy, King County property levy money being receipted into this fund. And then that brings down the general fund transfers in.
Okay.
Just until the ballpark gets back on its feet.
And then the bottom line, Dana, the $215,000 annual drop.
Yeah, coming into the general fund to make up, because of the 50% of ballpark activity fee that have to go into reserve, we have to transfer some money in from the general fund to keep that reserve.
Commingling of staff, there are fewer staff associated with this and much smaller bits and pieces of each. Nothing too exciting. So ongoing costs, our increase in WICA, which is our city's insurance. Internal service fund charges. We do have an annualized synthetic field service contract now. So the first 2 years were on the turf manufacturer. So now those are on us. So we have I think it's 11-ish thousand annually on service. So they come service the field, major cleans, a handful of repairs, the seams. So if you do or don't know, every line on the field is sewn in. and those seams tear just like a seam on a shirt. So those have to get sewn back together literally. It's not glued. They glue it and they sew it. So that happens quite often. Other ongoing costs, trying to work the dirt between fields 3 infield and then the outfield grass turf, and then managing the actual dirt itself is specialized import material. And then turf treatment, major treatments to overseed, batch, aerate, and all the things we need to get to on the turf. Those kind of ongoing mandates. Systematic maintenance is year-round on that facility. It does require routine inspections, more so than we can give it. We try to give it what it needs, but 0.6 just doesn't cut the mustard. Crumb rubber, we go through that. You are supposed to walk the fields on heavy use areas, make sure you're giving the crumb rubber back because it does move a lot. So, your home plates, your goalie areas, your penalty kicks, like those heavy use areas. Because if you do not put the crumb rubber back, it actually leaves the turf material itself less protected, and that's where more wear and more breaks and seams and rips happen. Of course, restrooms, trash, and fencing and netting. The netting takes a lot of work. It's actually, the netting is zip tied to the fencing, which comes off all the time. So then when that breaks off, balls hit the net and actually fall behind the fence, which is, it's an irritant, but it's something we have to kind of stick to and keep working. We're trying to look into like carabiners or something other than a zip tie, because the plastic zip ties end up just wearing with UV degradation and snapping fairly quickly. But a carabiner is not cheap, and I'm sure people could guess, but there are thousands of zip ties out there. So nothing carryover this year per se. Just capacity. I think the increase in staffing certainly is warranted and necessary to maintain this facility. It is a fantastic facility. We're super fortunate to have it, to be able to operate it and to have it in our community. So I have received tons of comments lately. So everybody's enjoying it. Just and consider adding the funds to enhance our regular servicing. And that's 106 in a nutshell.
So,
Yes, sir.
okay, I'm not muted.
You're not.
I muted myself. One of the questions that came up, thank you for this, Steve. It's so nice to concentrate. It's a big resource that we have for our citizens. Nice to see that separately. Some things get into CIP just because they're so large. And a question came up about funding for turf replacement in the CIP for third base. I don't know if that was talking about for the entire field, and because of the amount it's in CIP versus in the ballpark fund. Could you touch on that for us, please?
I will do it now because it might be easier to see in the CIP talk I have, but the third base line on the middle field, field 2, this is all field turf, right? All ringed around the concrete sidewalk. Just outside the fence line is about a 12-foot strip of grass. So you have the fence itself, and then a 10-foot strip or 12-foot strip wide of grass, and then you have the sidewalk that comes all the way around. So we've been asked by the user groups, hey, can we make that turf? It's easier to warm up on, it's a more consistent surface. And then of course the crew hear that and they love it because all that does is grow grass. And then when they mow it, grass blows onto the turf or weeds migrate onto the turf, and it's a pain in the butt to manage. So Joe's more than willing to get it prepped for then field turf to come lay turf down on it. It wouldn't need to be as managed as the regular facilities turf. But again, it's a conversion that is hopeful from both sides. And to your new finance director's, I guess, accolades, she likes to put things in the right bucket. So anything over $5,000 is now in a capital fund. So the work is over 5, so it is on the capital side. It has its own little image as we move to the capital projects.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I think that's a wise way to manage the budget. And I think most council members are aware of that, but I think it's important to underline it now and then. Some things go into the CIP, even though there might be other funds or separate like the ballpark, but because they're so large, we like to keep track of those and put it in the CIP. Thank you, Steve.
All right.
Question from Councilmember Naplin.
I'll keep this super brief. Really quick, will people be able to eat on that turf that's sitting outside? Because I think sometimes people, might set up chairs, blankets. There's a lot of people that eat while they're watching games or, waiting while they're warming up, drinking, and that's not allowed on the turf. So are we creating another area that's going to become problematic?
So as far as the use of, you don't want to commingle those lives, right? Because it's not the sports side of the turf. So honestly, outside of that, I don't care as much.
Okay.
But if you start to do it there, does that then carry into the field? So I mean, it's a double-edged sword. We can, you can put some signage up, but I know, baseball warm up and soccer warm up kind of stuff, it would be helpful. It's certainly not necessary, but it would remove quite a bit of manual labor, because you would be amazed at how much stuff blows through when you have a mower with a bag, but it still makes stuff fly onto the turf through the fence line. And then when weeds pop, because they go straight to it, and they grow now on the turf as well if you look at the edges. So it's more maintenance related. I really couldn't care what happens on the outside of the fence, because it's as much to save the guys time and effort as it is to give the community an extra place to sit and or warm up, because most of us, if it's not too terribly hot, would prefer to sit on that than the grass anyway.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't suddenly going to create this problem where you guys all the time are like, people are eating.
I think baseball itself, like they would self-manage, because if they want to go warm a pitcher up and a catcher, they would be over there and people would have to move a little anyway. So
So my other really quick question is very similar to my last question is we're pulling back a significant amount of general fund support for Big Rock Ball Field. And honestly, the park, we talk about user fees, paying for the park. The park is used by a lot of people that are not user fee related. The park is open to the public. There's a skate park. There's a playground for children. Lots of people go there and use it all the time to fly airplanes or, just other recreational activities. So I think it's typical that you would expect some general fund money to go in there. And, a very large amount of general fund support was pulled back, and instead it was replaced primarily with levy funds. And, the same argument I had before is people saw the King County Parks levy on the ballot that says you're going to get more parks, vote for this. So people are like, yes, I love parks. I want more parks. I want more funding for parks. And then what happened is we took the money and we just pulled back other money and sent it back to the general fund. And so it makes me concerned, because maybe we're allowing ourselves to do things in the general fund because we pulled money out. And in the future, that's like, it'll be hard to get that money back, because we're allocating that to expanding operations, adding employees, different things in the general fund. And so what we're doing is we're making a decision right now, it feels, that the levy money that the voters voted for is just gonna keep us at the status quo. They aren't getting anything new. So that's my only concern. I mean, I know we've talked about getting an extra parks worker, so maybe you could tie that together and say, yes, we are getting enhanced park support by getting a parks worker. But I just wanted to bring it up because I do feel uncomfortable about this in the same way as I do about the TBD sales tax that we asked voters.
And I'll just chime in and Dana, I know we'll have some comments too, but to be clear, the whole point of that levy replacement was because of the lack of use of the field. So Dana can expand on that a little bit more.
It was because to make up for the activity fees, and I know that the general fund is putting less in than it normally would, but I think because we have budgeted pretty conservatively for revenues in the general fund, after we kind of get through this, I'm hoping, which is just a couple of years of an economic hiccup, then potentially we'll have more general funds to put back into the park levy. And the park levy funds that were passed by the voters, King County actually uses a huge chunk of that money for their operations as well. So.
Thanks for the explanation. It is an unusual year dealing with reduced revenues, especially for use of the park. but it's such an important question Jennifer's asking. Sometimes it seems like council members beat up a budget. It's just part of our process to ask those tough questions and try to get clarification for our citizens. And so these are really meant in that light. It's just part of the budget process. Councilmember Naplin.
Sorry, I just had a follow up because I'm looking at the budget and it looks like we're only looking at, cutting the activity fees for 2021 by about $75,000, yet we're bringing in an additional $232,000 over the biennium. So the parks money the levy money from King County is doing a lot more than trying to fill in the gap of reduced activity fees. And yeah, I just don't feel good about it for various reasons. So
No,
my comment still stands.
A lot of it is just because of the economy. And so the hope truly is that after this biennium, more general fund money is available to support Big Rock rather
The
than.
general fund has record-breaking revenues. We're projecting record-breaking revenues. We're not projecting any shortfall in the general fund. In fact, coronavirus has given the city a gigantic boom with sales tax revenue. We have massive construction. We have seen absolutely no economic downturn whatsoever. And so I really have a hard time saying that we had to pull back general fund revenue because we're having reduced revenues due to the economic condition, because we're not. We're projecting the highest increase in revenue we've ever seen ever. So I really struggle with that. Are we showing reduced revenues in the general fund due to the economy?
We're not projecting as high as we normally would, but we're also showing an operating margin deficit in the general fund. So that's kind of what I was hoping to prevent by doing.
Due to spending choices, not revenue choices, in my opinion.
We could use fund balance instead of using park levy monies if that's the decision. This is just an option.
And to be clear, part of that too is we have been trying to balance the budget with the revenues coming in, revenues to expenditures as much as possible, and doing those one-time expenses out of fund balance. And that's the message we've heard loud and clear from council for the last 3 years, and that we believe strongly in as well. So if council wants to take some money temporarily out of fund balance to do that and then do some other park projects, nobody in administration is going to have an issue with that. That said, a chunk of the operations increase with those employees is really to get us to some level of balance and being able to keep up with the day-to-day workload. So we have to balance the need for some of that capital funding and long-term funding, but if we don't have the employees to do the work, it's not going to get done. So what we're trying really hard to do is make that balance so that we can provide those services. But if we don't have the people, we can't provide the service. So we'll get there, and we don't have any issues with changing where some of that funding comes from. So this is just proposed based on our philosophies, what we're looking at, and what we've been hearing long term in the past. So we can change where some of those funds come from. This is just proposed as is, but we can move that stuff around. A lot of this money can be moved around. It's just a matter of that philosophy on operations, doing as much as you can to match revenues, and then trying to use fund balance and those one-time monies for the one-time expenses as much as possible.
I appreciate that, and I apologize. I interrupted Director Mason. I got a little bit excited. So I know she's worked so hard on this, and it's really trying to make things balanced, but it just stood out to me. So thank you for your response.
Jennifer, thank you for the question. Again, since this is a public budget meeting, one of the things I'd like to mention briefly is, we don't have a formal Parks Department. There's no formal Parks Department employees. So one of the things we struggle with is how do we take care of these beautiful park properties we have within our existing budget. So it was so nice to have citizens dedicate some park levy monies, which some of that came to Duval, and we can dedicate that. But we do have a lot of other expenses. And that's where I think in our budget and the way we're set up, it's such a balance. We were taking funds from other things to help support our parks. And, there's no bait and switch here. It's just a matter of how do we take care of our citizens with all the different things we have. So it's really a fair question about, how much we're putting in. But eventually, I think we need to get to a point in our future where we have a dedicated parks department, folks that are taking care of it. And we're just not there right now. So in our budget, it's a challenge to do everything, and including taking care of our beloved parks. And using that levy money is absolutely appropriate. But Jennifer's question about, gee, we're pulling other monies back to do other things, it just, for citizens, sometimes that's an important question to ask. But trying to balance this budget and not having a parks department and dedicated funds, that's what we're looking at here. But thank you for the question, Jennifer. Other questions for Steve? We were talking about Big Rock Ball Field. Anything else come up? One thing that's still hanging out there, we had a suggestion that we reduce fees during COVID-19 to help, encourage youth sports at a time when they have reduced monies coming in. And I don't think we ever resolved that. I'm not bringing it up to resolve it tonight, but that's still on the plate. We found ways of being able to help our businesses, to be able to support our human services, to be able to help folks that are having trouble with their utility bills. And I think that's a fair question to keep on the table about, is it possible for us to reduce the fees that we're charging for use of the parks, especially for the big groups, to encourage our youth groups to continue to use the fields. And it's a balance, but I'd like to keep that on the table during our budget discussions and see if we can't find a way to reduce those fees. It reduces our revenues, but I think that would be an important move. Steve, I think we're ready to move on. You've got additional things for us?
Yeah, so we still have water, sewer, storm, and then capital.
And we're down to 30 minutes. Perfect. Maybe 25.
Perfect. Okay, let's go screen share. The good news is there's no general fund discussion for the utilities, so we should be fairly on our own here. Okay, Duval M&O 401, you see the cover page?
So we see Duval 1913, and yeah, there we are, agenda.
Same standard format. You may be getting bored of it by now, but it's nice for staff to have a consistent platform that we can put our PowerPoints together for. Okay, so water, and I hate to round to the 100th, but we're rounding to the 100th. So 5.01 FTEs, there's 6.33 total. Those other bits and pieces are utility billing and other folks who are still attributed to this fund, Dana included. So care, operations, and maintenance of the city's water distribution system, and all it includes 40 miles of water main, 2 reservoirs totaling 2.6 million gallons of storage, 1 lift station, pump station, 3 pressure relief stations. The relief and the reducing, the difference there is in our system, as you gain pressure going downhill and elevation, you have to relieve it at some point. So we have 3 ways to relieve that. Outside of atmospheric release, inside like the 450 zone, which is inside the tank. Pressure reducing stations. As you do go down the hill, we have to reduce pressure or it would be way too high. And then of course, hydrants, valves, blow-offs, meters, and airbags. There's about 1,000 of those bits and bobs in the system that we're supposed to manage. Water main flushing as well as sampling we take. And the images there are all your maintenance staff on the bottom that exist today. And then I'm not on there, of course, but your other staffers. Takes people to do it. So your budget summary table for expenditures is on this list. The large amount of transfers is the fund balance assisting with the capital elements relative to water. Had been advised earlier today that we have quite an ambitious CIP program. Without dreams, you got nothing. So we'll get there. But outside of that, in general, not a huge difference overall. Personnel salaries and wages and benefits are up because we do propose a new FTE in addition to the 1 to 2 conversion for maintenance, as well as preparing for the transition between assistant city engineer to city engineer. That is inclusive. And then Dana, on the interfund transfers, anything out of the northern there, just increase in our share of WCIA costs, as well as shared funds, equipment, computers, that kind of stuff. Fair share, is that fair? Dana, that's for you.
Sorry, yes, that is increases due to just the different way we're allocating for the internal service funds, and a lot of it is the trying to fully fund the vehicle replacement fund.
And in years past, we hadn't necessarily fully funded everything. There was partial funding or other.
Eventually, the goal is to eventually.
Oh, so there is the staffing. On your current FTEs, the gray part is just shaded back because that's the engineering side of the house relative to the darker, the operational side of the house. As I mentioned, transitioning a 1 to a 2. The new maintenance 1 position for water, dedicated directly to water. I also am hopeful to work with the labor group and convert that maintenance 1, should the vacancy occur, internally to a parks. So we currently have a parks worker budgeted, not implemented. Creating this new water worker would dedicate the work to water and then backfill and hope to transition with everybody's inclusion and approval to a parks dedicated worker, so that in theory would get 2 parks workers, which, you know, Joe and I have talked about how that gets implemented and just the amount of angst we would relieve in dedicating 2 people to parks year round instead of everybody hopping and jumping and doing what they could when they were on the schedule to do it would be incredible. So not to sell the maintenance worker for water short, because we do need that dedication, but that also would then redistribute the FTE spread of everybody else and reduce some of their parks work. So then we're not incurring any delta. It's just rejiggering everything to make parks whole with the 2 parks workers, as well as then sewer, water, street, storm whole on the back end. You have not seen the CIP for water. We're going through our water comprehensive plan, the 10-year plan. There is a slide in here, the next one here, that talks about what our system has the need for and the hours of labor to do so, which is why I grade back the engineering side of the house to darken the operational side of the house on the far left for current FTEs. So currently, of those shaded people, 2.65 FTEs service the water department. By standardized practice, we should be at 5.3, exclusive of admin and engineering. So we are almost 3 FTEs short. That's why we are proposing the 1 this year, and we have no other way to do this other than to try to fit in the additional work over the next 5 to 10 years, because we have full expectation we can't do it tomorrow. Although I assure you there's plenty of work to do that, but we are where we are, and we're trying to eat at this one bite at a time. We are excited for the opportunity to add the dedication of 1 worker and then redistribute folks should we be afforded that opportunity to do so. But this is all real. This is specific to our system from our consultant working with our team, Joe, Mike, the supervisor, the superintendent, project managers, myself included, assistant engineer, trying to make sure we have not missed anything, and then what we need to do workload wise to get the work done. And even not in this, I was just reading this table. If you get to the bottom right, administration, Joe doesn't have, and the crew, they don't have administrative support. So the 2 leads, if they're doing a project, they're ordering items. They're They're also taking phone calls from citizens because they have to. Nobody else is down there to do so or knows what's going on. So I think there are other opportunities to maybe streamline some of the work program down there, to get them some support to free up some of what they can do to in turn get more work done. But yeah, Joe is probably at his desk more than he's not. So it's great to do these look backs at where you are and what you need to help you move forward. But it makes you happy and sad all at the same time. I know we need more people, but it's sad we don't have the people to get the work done and help the guys get the work done they need to get done with that. So some of the one-time monies, the pressure relief vaults, they have large lids bigger than a desk. So we're looking at replacing some of those lids. They are all older concrete and they're galvanized, so they're not assist open. They are extremely heavy and dangerous. So part of the safety task was looking at all of those below grade entrances and making sure they're all reasonably safe. Put the one new laptop in for the maintenance one, because the maintenance one for water will be dedicated to water and we'll be working with telemetry. So there is a need for that roving work. The FlexNet system, which is the automated meter reading system that we have recommended and are hoping to move forward with, is part of this one-time money. And then there's 1.2 million transfer for capital projects. Some of the costs for ongoing, as we utilize the pump house more, that is energy consuming, all energy consuming effort. So there's more power consumptive costs, use and energy costs there. And then the one thing we have transitioned to this year in a trial was using 1-800 locate. So there's locators out there. So we've been working with them in an attempt under current budget to try and see how it was going for the year. It does relieve, I think the number earlier in the year, Joe and I talked between 600 and 800 hours of our staff time. So we are gaining some time back and we're hopeful to do that. Moving forward with the locate service contract, it's under 25,000 a year. It is split evenly between sewer, water, and street, or sewer, water, and storm. So about $8,333 per. It's under 25 grand. It is ticket based. So as we grow, every time someone calls in a locate, we do get that per unit charge. So it'll go up over time, and believe it or not, you have to, some of you have to call in and locate if you're going to set a for sale sign nowadays, and those are all over town. So a lot of work, but the service contract has freed our guys up to do regular work instead of some of the work that we can sub out to folks. And then I think mandates, just managing the system as we grow. We are adding, feet of pipe on a daily basis. South end for sure is going to see a dramatic increase. The toll 2 tie-in. So just managing our system. We have made an effort to increase our water quality downtown. So, the tolts are off the tolt, which is on the far south side of town. Old Town is as far as possible from our feeds. So water quality degrades over time and chlorine residual. So you lose that as you age in a pipe, and as you travel, you age. So we had low water quality in Old Town. We've made a concerted effort to increase that, which we have. Normally, state law is 0.2 milligrams per liter of chlorine residual. We are now we were hovering at 0.2 a lot. So we are now hovering at 0.8, 0.9. SPU changes the amount of chlorine residual in the system that is delivered to us between 1.2 and 1.4 milligrams per liter. So again, it degrades over time. The further you get, the longer you're in the system, the more consuming the chlorine residual is had. So it takes effort, and it takes a lot of effort, and especially without telemetry, there's no eyes in the system. It's all manual. So carryover in this fund is just carrying forward the TOLP project, which is underway in design. I'll touch more on that on the CIP element. Cutting room floor, not a whole lot of changes here. I think with the staffing additions, reorganizing it is going to give us a look-see, and not jumping into new FTEs. Yes, we need them, but again, how we need them may be different than, this year, rather than living a year or two with changes at hand to really just understand where we need to be in years, 3 and 4 of implementation of additional staff. So that's the water fund.
Questions from council members? I don't see any, Steve. Steve, could you just refresh for me what topics you have? And I just wanted to ask, because we're at 7:13, so we've got a short time and I don't want to hurry this. This is an important part for our budget. Is it possible if we don't complete your items, that we can simply move those to the special council meeting? Is that allowed?
Not tonight.
Not tonight?
It's a special, so you're not supposed to add items to the agenda that
Yeah.
aren't already published.
I appreciate that. So my follow-up is, can we extend this? And Jody would have to go to the other meeting and announce that council is delayed getting to the meeting. So it would delay the start of our special council meeting, but it would allow us some additional time to discuss. I know Daniel's not here. This may fall in a legal question, but does anybody have input or thoughts on it?
I can't physically go to another meeting because I am the host of this meeting and I would be the host of the other meeting, and Zoom doesn't let me host both meetings at the same time. And I'm not 100% sure if we'd even be allowed to start a special meeting late because it's already been noticed. So I think safe than sorry. And I know council wants to avoid doing additional presentations on cows so that they can have open discussion. But one option would be, if council is amenable to it, is to push any presentations that we can't get to tonight to the 5th cow, because it is wide open besides council discussions. Right?
Councilmember Langle.
I'm really glad this came up because I think the CIPs are probably the most core. I mean, I realize operations is the basic stuff, but I think we really have to understand our CIPs if we're going to do any substantive financial planning in the city. And I guess what I'm asking is that we figure out a way to give Steve more time to talk about some of the other pieces in his CIP. I've looked at it, and I think it's a really ambitious plan, and I want to make sure when we do it right. And so that means we have to really understand what's really encompassed in those components.
We've really taken to heart council's desire to have discussions because presentations don't allow for that. But Steve and directors have been so good about letting it be interactive so we can kind of discuss things. I think Councilmember Langle's suggestion is appropriate for the time restraints and special meetings requirements. So can I just see a show of hands if council members are okay with moving our CIP discussions to one of our cows that's wide open for discussion? That would allow us to concentrate a little better, to have interactive discussions. So how many are good with moving our CIP discussion to our November 5th cow? Jody, I think I heard. So I see, looks like we have enough hands there. So Steve, you've got some flexibility. I would suggest we go ahead and not do CIP tonight. We'll do that and you can finish up other discussion. That work?
Yeah, we'll forge ahead. Appreciate
Great.
that.
And I'd like to end this at 7:25 so everybody has an opportunity to go to the next meeting. So thank you.
All right, so moving on to then the sewer operations. Share screen.
On the water, so that water budget, operation budget, did that bring in any speculation on the outcome of your water comp plan on the terms of rates?
No, it has not yet. So right now, just moving forward with the rates as programmed per the escalator that is annually expected through the end of the year in all the rates. So GFC's rates, permit fees and all that. So it would just be standard at this point.
Thank you.
And I like Matt was using the chat bar. He was okay with the last item. I love it. Okay, so sharing screen, moving into sewer. All right, so nothing too out of the ordinary here. Same minimized crew with operations, but again, 7.65 FTEs total, 5.01 in operations, utility billing, and others are part of that big number. 32 miles of sewer main, 5 lift stations. The city has worked hard over time to get rid of lift stations because they do require a lot of O&M. We did take a new one on this year with Duval Village. So what was once 9 still is now 5, which is great. And we are at the point where I don't think we can remove any more lift stations, just geographically and vertically. With the wastewater treatment plant, right, we have to fulfill our obligations for testing, monitoring, sampling, and reporting. And we did the 3 gentlemen on the bottom there were part of the main reason they were awarded the Outstanding Wastewater Treatment Plant Award from the Department of Ecology by meeting all their targets and expectations and not missing any samples or any reports, and or having any bad or below standard tests throughout the year. So good stuff. Budgetarily speaking, between 20 and 21, not a huge difference. Overall, I think the capital outlays portion is the only real difference there. And nothing too exciting. Transfers are basic here. This is not going to anything in particular, it just transfers out for the fair share of needs for other departments. Still hopeful for a maintenance 1 instead of an operator, as previously discussed, for the workload out of this group as well. That has been programmed in the budget as presented. So I didn't call it new technically because it was there before, but at some point we would love to move forward with changes to get that initiated. Some of the ongoing increases, they may not be in overall budget, but within the budget itself, we are aging, right? The plant came online in 2004, so we are losing bigger pieces all the time. So blower replacements, and they are part of the locate services contract work that we are hoping to move forward to. Mandates, weather is a mandate and time is a mandate. So this place runs 24/7. Sewer never stops. We have permit obligations. We have aging equipment to replace. And then the big one we're really wanting to attack over the next biennium is the I&I inflow and infiltration into the system. So the little graph you see there, we did a little pilot study, and some of the product is not marketed per se, but there's a guy out of Carnation who came to us last year and said, hey, I have these things. They're flow sensors. So that I use them for stormwater flow and irrigation conveyance all over the country, and including here for flooding and whatnot on the river. So he said, hey, I can make something for you guys. It's relatively cheap. It's a $20 a month fee for data because it's pinging data. And then it's a measurement device. So the graph you see in blue is actual flow from sewer. So the lower lines are what you would expect to see based on use, right? It does oscillate in the day and the night. But the inverse of the green is the intensity of the rainfall. So as the rainfall increases, we consume and see a lot more rainwater in our sewer network, right? So the age system, non-gasketed pipe, non-gasketed manholes, water just weeps in, finds its way to the plant, and then we pay to process clean water. It gets mixed with the mixed liquor, and now it's dirty water. So getting that out is an effective strategy to reduce our overall operations and some of those other costs. The power consumptive costs of the treatment plant are over $80,000 a year. So we normally operate in the 500,000-600,000 gallons a day in the summer, and then in the winters, you're at 1.25. So that is all rainwater. So it would be significant to remove that from our system. So carryover, some I&I work we have not gotten to. I think along the lines of Councilmember Lengel's input on, CIP work's ambitious, and case in point, we haven't gotten to some of the stuff that we're putting forward. So we do have a strategy for that moving forward, which we can talk about in the CIP. The UV system we have pushed forward. I know there was a little bit of angst prior to my arrival on how to get this done and what should be done, and making sure it was not only ultraviolet UV. So we are tertiary treatment. So the last bit of water that goes out of here is treated with ultraviolet system. So that is part of our permit. It is required. Operator Mike is worried that if it dies, we're non-permit compliant, and then we're going to be in a world of hurt. And it is 25 years old because that was here prior to the system upgrade in 04. So he's very nervous and wants that remedied, and has made it clear, you know, it's up to me now because he's spoken his piece so many times. He's done speaking it. I told you guys I need it done. So we're putting that back on the list for next year. And then the mobile pump unit, which would help us with our lift stations. Should we be at a position to need to evacuate fluid, we can't do that right now. So it would just unfortunately go wherever gravity would take it. So trying to be prepared for that. We did remove some budget for blower and pump replacements, but what we have added is the programmatic element of that, where we're not going to wait for them to die. We're going to replace them as we go, pick the worst ones, put a new one on the shelf if we have time, and or replace an old one that could be rebuilt, but a lot of times they can't. So that's what's been cut. And that is sewer in a nutshell. Questions?
Questions from council members? Well, Steve, I'm not seeing any. We're at 7:24. My recommendation is we go ahead and leave this meeting. That'll give council members and staff a few minutes to get ready for our next meeting at 7:30. So if everybody agrees with that, we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you, Steve. Well done. We'll see everybody at our council meeting here in a few minutes.